Actually, we'll save announcements until the afternoon when we come back after lunch. I do want to mention that the two-man scout team that went to Hong Kong came back safe and they're home. So we do thank God for that. Okay, let's turn to Ezekiel chapter 39. Ezekiel 39, and I'll read from verse 1. It says, "Therefore thou son of man, prophesy against Gog, and say, Thus saith the Lord Jehovah, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn thee back, and leave but the sixth part of thee, and will cause thee to come up from the north parts, and will bring thee upon the mountains of Israel, and I will smite thy bow out of thy left hand, and will cause thine arrows to fall out of thy right hand. Thou shalt fall upon the mountains of Israel, thou and all thy bands, and the people that is with thee. I will give thee unto the ravenous birds of every sort, and to the beasts of the field to be devoured. Thou shalt fall upon the open field, for I have spoken it, saith the Lord Jehovah. And I will send a fire on Magog, and among them that dwell carelessly in the isles, and they shall know that I am Jehovah. So will I make my holy name known in the midst of my people Israel, and I will not let them pollute my holy name any more. And the heathen shall know that I am Jehovah, the Holy One in Israel." And I'll stop reading there. Now we went through this in our last day in the Word. We discussed the first few verses, and I just want to make mention again of what this is spiritually applying to, or the time period that it's applying to, because that's really the most difficult thing in Bible study and reading all these accounts in Daniel or Revelation or Ezekiel. The difficult thing is having the right time and season, because if you're in the wrong time and season, you're going to get a wrong understanding about the whole passage. And that's why it's so important that God opened up the scriptures to reveal the biblical calendar of history, and gave us a good understanding of time and judgment, so that we can fit things in their proper season, in their proper time. For example, in Ezekiel 39, we know Gog is a type of Satan. And we can read that this is describing Gog and Magog's fall. And so we understand it's talking about the fall of Satan. Well, doesn't the Bible tell us that Satan fell at the cross? Behold, or I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. It says in Luke chapter 10. Or in Revelation chapter 12. I'll go there. In Revelation 12, it says in verse 9, "And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. And I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now is come salvation, and strength, and the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ. For the accuser of our brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night." So he's cast out, also said to be cast down, because he's cast down to the earth. And remember what it says in 2 Peter chapter 2, in verse 4, "For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment." So we have these verses that speak of Satan falling, in Luke 10, being cast down. If you're cast down, you would think It's like falling. And how do we know Ezekiel 39 is not referring to 33 AD when Jesus went to the cross and Satan was bound? We can know it's not, but how do we know that? Anyone? Because Gog and Magog is only mentioned one other place in the Bible, in Revelation 20. That is outside of Ezekiel 38 and 39. You can read of maybe the name Gog or Magog in Genesis as the names are used, but as far as God setting up Gog and Magog as a type and figure of Satan, it's only Ezekiel 38, 39, and Revelation 20, and we read that Satan is cast down. First of all, in verse 1, and I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. He laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years and cast him into the bottomless pit and shut him up. So since it's a bottomless pit and he's cast into it, he was cast down. And so that would fit with Revelation 12, where the dragon is cast down. It would fit with Luke 10. I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven, because in Revelation 12 it mentions he's being cast down from heaven. And so this identifies with 2 Peter 2, verse 4, cast down to hell, into the bottomless pit. And yet you won't read of Gog and Magog in connection with Satan being cast down at the cross, because when he's being bound here by the angel who came down from heaven, who is Christ, it's happening when Jesus went to the cross. It's not until the loosing of Satan in verse 7 of Revelation 20 that Gog and Magog comes into the picture. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints about in the beloved city. And that tells us that Gog and Magog are not in view until Satan's loosed, until he's loosed. And in Ezekiel 39, because if you would read the earlier chapter, he's coming against the mountains of Israel. He's been loosed. He's been loosed, and by God's grace, he's opened up our eyes to understand the timeline, that the 1,000 years of his binding had to do with the completeness of time that related to the church age, the 1955 years of the church age, and then after 1,000 years, that complete period of time, which coincided with the end of the church age, he's loosed, and it agrees, or in time, with the end of the church age, the start of the Great Tribulation period, and he's coming against the camp of the saints. Now, the other question is, okay, we understand Gog and Magog relates to the Great Tribulation, because he comes into the scene in Revelation 20 once Satan has been loosed out of the bottomless pit, and we recognize that identifies with the Great Tribulation. Well, then why isn't what we're reading in Ezekiel 39 telling us about the time of the Great Tribulation, the 23-year period? Satan was loosed when? By God's grace, we even know the dates. At the end of the church age, the beginning of the Great Tribulation, May 21, 1988, he's loosed. And then there's that awful 2,300 evening mornings, but the 23-year period is carried out until May 21, 2011, and then it completes. But throughout the entire 23 years, it's as though Gog and Magog is victorious, overcoming. He comes against the camp of the saints. It says in Revelation 11, and we can know, this also identifies with Revelation 20, when Satan is loosed out of his prison. And how can we know? Well, let's read Revelation 11, verse 7, speaking of the two witnesses. And when they shall have finished their testimony, just like the 1,000 years is finished, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them. Who is in a bottomless pit? The dragon, the old serpent, the devil, also known as the beast. He was in the bottomless pit, and after the two witnesses finished their testimony, ties in with the end of the 1,000 years. That's why we say the 1,000 years is a figurative number to represent the duration of the church age, which from 33 AD to 1988 is 1955 years. And that's the point of Satan's loosing. And so the beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them, against the two witnesses, against the camp of the saints, against the beloved city. They're all synonyms, except the two witnesses identifies with the word of God, the testimony of the Bible in the church. It shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them. Is Gog and Magog killed when Satan's loosed? Is that referring to Gog and Magog? It's referring to the two witnesses are overcome. The word overcome is, I think, translated or closely related to the word victory. They're overcome and killed by the beast, by King Nebuchadnezzar, who overcame and conquered Judah and Jerusalem. Did Judah and Jerusalem overcome King Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians during that 70 years? No. They were soundly defeated. They couldn't even put up any kind of real resistance. God was against them. God was fighting against them. God's the one who raised up Nebuchadnezzar, my servant. Just like it was God who loosed Satan, who had the key to the bottomless pit, who opened the bottomless pit at the proper time and loosed him. And we see the results all over the face of the earth as the world has changed and will never go back to what it was before, like nothing anyone could believe. You know, if you transported any people, time machine, if that were possible, which it's not, and you just transported somebody from the 50s to today or to any time really in the last 15, 20 years, they're not going to recognize not only this country, they're not going to recognize this world. Or you pick the decade, you pick the century, transport anyone from the past to the present. And as soon as they find out that men marry men, women marry women, that there's abortion centers all over the place, and the music and the hairstyles and on and on and on, they're not going to have any. Really, it would be shocking. It would be shocking to anyone from the past if they were to see the world today. And it's all because Satan's been loosed. He's been loosed. It says in Revelation 13, again referred to as the beast, in verse 6, and he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God. And by the way, the beast in verse 1 rises up out of the sea. That would be like the bottomless pit. He's coming up out of the bottomless pit. It's the time of the loosing of Revelation 20 was talking about. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them. It was given. It's a gift. That if we saw that in relationship to grace or faith, it's given unto them to believe. What would we think? From the hand of God. God has given it. Well, who gave Satan that power? Who gave him the authority? God gave him the authority. My servant Nebuchadnezzar. And so you see, that's the problem. That's been the problem when we come to Ezekiel 39 and we find Gog and Magog are defeated. They're defeated. And it says in verse 4, verse 3, and I will smite thy bow out of thy left hand, and will cause thine arrows to fall out of thy right hand. Thou shalt fall upon the mountains of Israel, thou and all thy bands, and the people that is with thee. I will give thee unto the ravenous birds of every sort, and to the beasts of the field to be devoured. Thou shalt fall upon the open field. And the word open is the word face or presence. Thou shalt fall upon the face of the field. And what does the field represent? The world. You'll fall upon the face of the world. And we say the world because of the parable. In Matthew 13, the field is the world. So Gog and Magog will fall, and it will be in full view of the entire world. And I will send a fire on Magog, and among them that dwell carelessly in the isles, and they shall know that I am Jehovah. And then it goes on. It says in verse 9, and they that dwell in the cities of Israel shall go forth, and shall set on fire, and burn the weapons, both the shields and the bucklers, the bows and the arrows, and the handstaves and the spears, and they shall burn them with fire 7 years. Now, do you see the problem? The problem has always been that when you read Ezekiel 39, and you read about Gog and Magog's fall, and when we look at all the Bible has to say, we understand that it has to do with a great tribulation, but we also understand that Satan, who's called Gog, does not fall during the great tribulation. Like Nebuchadnezzar did not fall during that 70 years. It came at the end of the 70 years. At the end of the great tribulation, is when Satan falls. And we're going to look at the word fall. We'll go to several verses to look at that. But the problem is it mentions 7 years. And it also mentions 7 months a little later on. And the 7 years and the 7 months has to involve, or it has to do with the end of the battle, because the 7 years is the time of burning the enemy's weapons. When you're fighting a war, can you burn the enemy's weapons if the battle's engaged and they're winning? You can't do that. It's only at the end of the battle, when you go back over the battlefield and they're all dead bodies, and then you pick up their weapons, then you can start to burn them. And so the language is clear. Even verse 10, they shall spoil those that spoil them, and rob those that rob them, saith the Lord Jehovah. That's a statement that identifies with the winner of a war, the winner of a battle. They spoiled us, now we spoil them. We will take all the bounty, all their riches. Like in 2 Chronicles 20, there were 3 days in actually the same word, spoil or rob, is found in 2 Chronicles 20 when they're collecting all the wealth of the enemy army that is dead bodies lying on the ground. And so the problem is the time. 7 years in the Bible is a number that identifies with the Great Tribulation. in the book of Genesis with Joseph's famine, 7 years. 7 months is a number that identifies with great tribulation. The ark was taken and was in the hands of the Philistines for 7 months. And so we have two numbers that identify with great tribulation. It's why Mr. Camping said it was very difficult language, but he thought it was describing the end of the Great Tribulation. And somehow the 7 years and 7 months would relate back to the Great, but that doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. You're picking up the weapons for 7 years and burning them, and you're burying bodies for 7 months after the battle. And so that's been the problem in understanding this passage until now we're able to understand it. But we'll get to that. I don't know in this study, but we'll, Lord willing, get to that. Now let's look at this word that's used in verse 4, thou shalt fall upon the mountains of Israel. Verse 5, thou shalt fall upon the open field, for I have spoken, as saith the Lord Jehovah. Now the word fall is found in Jeremiah 50. Jeremiah 50 and verses 14 and 15. It says, put yourselves in array against Babylon round about, all ye that bend the bow. Shoot at her, spare no arrows, for she has sinned against Jehovah. Shout against her round about. She has given her hand, her foundations are fallen, her walls are thrown down. For it is the vengeance of Jehovah. Take vengeance upon her, as she has done, do unto her. And in Jeremiah 50,